As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. Today we have a returning guest, Joel Salatin, founder of Polyface Farms, widely known author and speaker on self-sufficiency and permaculture. Joel's here to talk with us about his book and speech by the same name called Folks, This Ain't Normal. And as we're looking at our culture that we are surrounded in as people concerned about the direction things are heading for our families and wanting to do the actions that are going to be prudent and responsible to take care of our families, sometimes we find ourselves dumbfounded that we seem to be the only ones seeming out of step or swimming up the wrong way up the stream or thinking the emperor doesn't have any clothes on. And Joel's talk, Folks, This Ain't Normal, is based on his book by the same title. He talks about our future. He bets will be more instead incorporate more tried and true realities from the past, and that ours is the first culture with no chores for children, cheap energy, heavy mechanization, computers, supermarkets, TV dinners, and unpronounceable food. Joel's here to talk to us both in a sobering and inspiring way about how we can tackle the seemingly impossible large tasks that confront our generation. Thanks for joining us again here on Reluctant Preppers, Joel.
Thank you, Dunnigan. It's great to be with you.
And you've given this talk all over, and if you could just lead us right on into it, as people face the reality of living in a culture that in some ways seems counterintuitive, counter to self-sufficiency or reliance, that sort of thing. Help us see what is going on around us and what people need to realize about that this is not the way things are meant to be.
Yeah, well, the first chapter in which the average child doesn't have any chores. And, we have through everything from child welfare laws to, not allowing children to work and earn a wage. I know this is all harkens back to people. When I start talking like this, people think I'm wanting to go back to Charles Dickens and all that. But there's a lot of distance between Dickensian England and children actually participating in the adult world. And I'm absolutely convinced that self-esteem and self-worth come far more from a job, a real necessary, important thing well done, whether it's filling the wood box, gathering eggs, milking the cow, churning some butter, than it does to be the top point getter on Angry Birds. And I think we've done a tremendous disservice to our youth, to our children in this country, by denying them the chance to viscerally interact with important things to do.
Right, we need to be needed. Yep.
Yes, yeah. Everybody needs to be needed. Children need to be needed, and in our own family, our kids, Daniel, our son, had rabbits, and our daughter had a baking business, and from 8 years old, little kids, and their customers, would tell them, these are the best rabbits or the best pound cake or zucchini bread or whatever, I've ever had. I serve it to my garden club and all this. And what that does to the self-actualization of a person is truly profound. And it helps. One of the reasons that we have, boomerang kids, they just keep coming back and coming back. One of the reasons is because we haven't learned to launch. You can't just deny all real life experience until 18 and then expect to have a successful launch.
Yeah. Just this weekend, my wife and I saw an actual news story in the current news, national news, that a pair of sisters were shut down by the health department and the police for running a popcorn and lemonade stand because they didn't have a inspection from the health department, a license from the city, and all this sort of thing. And they actually were not going to be allowed to have this. And the police chief was standing behind the decision and everything. And it's just a world gone mad. And But in the spirit of something you shared with us last time about you can call it something different, the girls reopened their stand, but they won't accept payment, only donations.
All right, and the chances are they're making more money than they did when they were charging, because people are so incensed, about their treatment. Often it does, in fact, come out to be a good thing. I mean, a good thing for them, but it's not to face the kind of regulatory climate that children face starting businesses now is just incredible, and the whole having to report income over just a few $100s and suddenly having to be responsible for FICA and withholding and all this stuff as a night. I mean, plenty of children can have a $1,000 business at our grandson's 11. He raises ducks for duck eggs. He has a $3,000 business as an 11-year-old, and he's supposed to file taxes. It's just ridiculous. So this is what I'm trying to do in this book is try to help people to understand that this isn't just my opinion about things. It's when you look back through the course of history and you say, well, how have civilizations and families, how have people functioned and functioned successfully over time? What you see are patterns that that we're not practicing in our country at all. Patterns of children having early childhood responsibility. The Jewish bar mitzvah is 12 years old, adult. I mean, how many Kit Carson, when he rode on the Pony Express, was only, I think, 12 or 13 years old. Can you imagine, sending your 12 or 13-year-old out to run U.S. mail through hostile country on a horse? I mean,
most children aren't even allowed to play outside, go down to the park or whatever anymore, or go trick-or-treating on Halloween or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, you talk about the instilling of that value. I mean, even as recently as the inauguration of John F. Kennedy saying, ask not what your country, it can do for you, but what you can do for your country. That is a basic value in a thriving culture and society. And you in opposition to the collapse stage of empire, such as the end of the Roman Empire, whatever, where that self entitlement and just reveling in the pleasures of the moment become self-absorbing.
Yeah, bread and circuses. That was the deal. Yeah, and that's a far cry from society owes me a living, and I'm entitled to a certain wage, regardless of my worth or my value. I'm entitled to this particular wage. I'm entitled to this particular medical treatment or food or whatever. That's a far cry from John F. Kennedy's ask what you can do for your country. So, yeah, these are abnormal times, and the book grew out of. I do a lot of speaking on college campuses, and I love young people. I mean, they're the future. But I became incredibly disturbed that the young people, that so many young people who actually think that an iPod hooked to your waist and a cell phone hooked to your ear, and Velveeta cheese and heat and eat microwavable hot pockets. Being a lot more informed and interested in the latest dysfunction in the Kardashian household than what's going to become flesh of our flesh and bone of our bones, where we don't even give a thought. I mean, I think the statistic is 85% of Americans have no clue at 4 o'clock what's going to be for dinner. We're that thoughtless about what we had for dinner. Goodness. Until just
that's just because somebody's going to provide it to us, right? I mean, one way or another.
Yeah, but think about that throughout history. Nobody could ever live that way. Nobody could just la through and assume that in in December and January, and, when the snow's flying, that the supermarket shelves would be full. No, they had to actually create a larder. They had to, one of my most neat experiences is going down to the Powhatan village in Williamsburg, and go to the Powhatan village there, and they have these lattice sapling skeleton then stretched over the buffalo hides over them, these simple houses, and up in that skeleton structure, that inside that scaffolding, are hanging all of the food that the family's going to eat for the next, at least during the winter, everything they're going to eat during the winter, and then during the season, they kind of hunted and had their own fresh stuff. But, bags of parched corn and dried squash, dried fruits, smoked, fish and venison and all this stuff was hanging up in there. And I think it's just a really powerful expression and reminder every day of our nesting, our dependency in this nest that we call nature. And today, I think too many people think that in order to commune with nature, that they've got to get on a jet and fly 3,000 miles from home and go to some wilderness place in order to commune with nature. And I'm saying, we are part of nature, but we have extricated ourselves from it in our daily lives because we have the luxury of being able to live thoughtlessly.
Well, what do you say to people who say that the people who have had to live that way throughout history, and maybe this is the first generation who really haven't had to, did it so out of necessity? They didn't have a choice. We, however, have licked nature. We've got technology now. We've got supply chains. We've risen above that, and now we're doing what they would have done all along if they'd only had the choice. But that we've got it, so that puts us in a better footing. I mean, what do you say to people who think that this just proves that we've evolved and we've arrived?
Well, what I say to them is, okay, then if that's so great, then why do we have 700 dead zones in riparian areas, more than any other country? Why are all of our agriculture aquifers dropping precipitously every year? Why does the U.S. lead the world in chronic disease, cancer, type 2 diabetes, obesity, those kinds of things?
I'm sure if we just run around for the cure with colored ribbons on, it'll cure that, though. The technology will take care of that one, too. I agree. That's a really bizarre one that people don't stop and go, wait a minute, this isn't a communicable illness that we're all subject to. We've changed something, and that's what's causing these serious, like, cancers and that sort of thing. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, yeah. So, we live in a time when any thinking person understands that everything from consumer debt to unpronounceable food and autism. I mean, the kids getting autism up to what it's gone in just the last 30 years, gone from 1 in 10,000 to now 1 in something like 68. I mean, these are,
and diabetes.
Yeah, if any of these things acted quicker, it would be national news every day. I mean, we'd be all wondering, are we going to survive? And my point is that the way to bet is to bet on the horse that's won this race for many, 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 many years. And I'm certainly not anti-technology. My goodness, I love the fact that our kitchen has a refrigerator, hot and cold running water on tap, and a stove at the flick of a button. We can have heat. We don't have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and start a fire and the wood stove, so we got enough heat to scramble eggs at 7. I'm really grateful and thankful, and I am not a technology. I'm not a Luddite.
Right. That's one of the things that was provocative about your write-up on your talk. You said You do not believe we'll return to horse and buggies, washboards, and hoop skirts, but you believe we'll go back in order to go forward using technology to reestablish historical normalcy. What does that mean?
Well, it means that we will. Let's take the kitchen for example. We think about how our kitchen differs from, say, Thomas Jefferson's kitchen. Or Dolly Madison's kitchen. That'd be, I guess, maybe better. She's more well known in the kitchen. And think of how our kitchen differs from hers. What I'm suggesting is that you cannot have dietary integrity for yourself unless you are spending some time in your kitchen like Dolly Madison did. You cannot simply subcontract all of your food thinking and acquisition and quality thought to either food safety bureaucrats in D.C. or to multinational corporations or the Chinese who are going to get it to your supermarket. When you refuse to participate in these extremely foundational survival things that all civilizations have done to survive. Well, take another example. No civilization who failed to feed itself has ever, thrived. It's always collapsed, and that's true for communities as well. And so I would suggest that for the U.S. to say, well, goodness, we don't need to produce anything. We'll just make theme parks and fantasy worlds and Disneyland, and the food can come from Peru and China and Vietnam. That is betting on a horse that has never been in the race. In fact, it's putting your money on a horse that throughout history has always lost the race. And I'm suggesting that communities who feed themselves, I'm not saying you can't have coffee or bananas if you live in Minnesota, but I am suggesting that communities that get the lion's share of their food from their regional food shed where they can see it and participate in it, know where it comes from, be a part of it, know that it's out there. Not only is that good for the local economy and the local ecology, but it becomes the basis of food security. If you're depending on the merchant marine and the Teamsters unions and the longshoremen unions and fair trade status and
OPEC
and OPEC, yes, thank you. And if you're depending on all that for your food chain, it's an extremely vulnerable, fragile food chain, and history shows that vulnerability has never stood the test of time. So if you're wanting to create a non-vulnerable household, a non-vulnerable family, you have to put thought on the sustenance of life. You cannot just run off to the soccer game and assume that Happy Meals are always going to be there for you or be good for you on your way home. So that's one of my little sound bites now is that that you've really joined the sustainability self-reliant crowd when you actually spend a lot of time eating leftovers because leftovers indicate that you have actually prepared food and you've probably prepared plenty, and you're actually thinking about Tuesday's meal, Wednesday's meal, Thursday's meal, and rather than coming up to 12 and suddenly saying, oh no, I guess I got to go out to eat, and suddenly you've spent $20 on a tip and on food of dubious extraction, unless you spend 30, and then you wonder where your money went, and you wonder where your health went, and you wonder where your self-reliance went.
Well, you mentioned that intriguing thought that technology has a role to play in reestablishing historical normalcy. What role does technology have to play?
Well, I think the role that technology plays is, if I may be just a bit mystical for a moment, is that it enables us to massage our nest, massage our ecological womb, if you will, more efficiently, more efficaciously and efficiently than we could before. I'll give you an example, or the nature could even do itself. I'll give you two examples. One is the way that soil is built. Let's go to who thinks about soil, and yet all wealth actually derives from soil. And again, no civilization has ever survived when it destroyed its soil, and no civilization has destroyed soil faster than the U.S.
Ironically, that used to be the way that you would defeat your enemies, is you would try to ruin their soil after you beat them.
Yeah, absolutely. But nobody's got to ruin ours because there's not going to be any left in a few years.
We're doing it to ourselves.
So how nature does this is with perennials and herbivores and predation and fire. Predation both by humans and by four-legged predators. The biomass grows from solar energy, and something comes along and eats it and prunes it back so it can start to grow again and be, in its rapid growth cycle, and it doesn't just, desiccate and exude carbon dioxide, but actually goes back into the soil in manure and urine and carcasses and things like that. Okay, so that's the way soil is built. It's built with perennials and migratory herbivore patterns. All right, well, we don't have the migratory herbivores anymore because we decided, people should own a piece of property, put a fence around. So we don't have the migratory herbivores anymore. We don't have fire anymore, which recycled and disturbed and rejuvenated and freshened up things, because if you start a fire, the fire department comes out and puts it out. So we don't have that. What we have is computer microchipped electric fence energizers and extremely cheap electric fence wire. We even have wire that has thread filaments interwoven to polyethylene fibers, so that this strong polyethylene can carry an electric charge, and the computer microchip in the energizer packs 10,000 volts of power on half an amp at 4,000ths of a second duration, with an impedance that builds up so little resistance that there's no warmth to melt the polyethylene. I mean, this is absolutely space-age technology, but it allows us, for the first time in human history, to mimic on a domestic commercial scale the migratory patterns, without wolves and without lions and without fire, to duplicate this incredible pattern of herbivore on perennial and pruning to recycle the solar energy and the biomass and carbon sequestration. This has never been able to be done until now. The closest that it came, of course, were the old historical nomads, and they did the best they could, but it's still not as good as you can do with actual physical infrastructure control like electric fencing. So there's an example of using technology to truly caress our ecological womb and do what it does, and do it actually better. Okay, number two, there's discussion that 600 years ago, what is today the United States, might have had as much as 10% of its land mass underwater from beaver ponds. There were millions and millions and millions of beavers clear down in the Southwest. I've asked folks when I've been down in New Mexico and stuff. Oh yeah, there were beaver dams, beaver ponds everywhere. Okay, well this created a landscape hydration. It created terraces to hold back sediment from floods and erosion, because floods haven't just come since the Europeans came. Mississippi means old, big muddy. So there was plenty of erosion and muddy going on back before the Europeans came. But there was a huge labyrinth of beaver impoundments on streams and creeks and places to create these incredible terraces. In fact, many extremely fertile fields that we farm today are still the sedimentary deposits from centuries of deposited material in, what were very shallow, they're always very, very shallow, these very shallow beaver ponds, beaver dams. Okay, well, so the beavers are gone. Well, we don't have the beavers. What we do have is we have very advanced technology earth-moving equipment. We have, dump trucks and bulldozers and excavators and track hoes and track loaders and all sorts of things, okay? And we've got petroleum. Again, it's something new that we haven't had, using technology to extract cheap energy. So we can now take this excavation equipment and we can actually, instead of like the beavers who were always dependent on damming up a stream or a creek, we don't need to go to the stream or creek. We can actually build an impoundment where there is no stream or creek up in a valley, say, up much higher in elevation on the landscape, and we can make our impoundments way high on the landscape so that we actually can use those impounded raindrops many more times as they gravitationally move downhill. The beavers were limited to going where there was already a stream or a creek. We can do beaver work one step better by going even higher on the landscape with excavation equipment. So there are two perfect examples of where we can take this historic pattern of how nature works and leverage our technology to be able to do it just a little bit better without adulterating, without messing things up. It's quite profound.
Now, also in our channel, we try to talk about, for individual homeowners and families and small communities, where they can make a start on a very small scale. Could you give us one or two examples of something that you think people can do on a household scale or on a neighborhood scale? Something if they want to make a start in away from what ain't normal and to something that starts to reclaim some historical normalcy and some self-reliance along the way.